Chapter 1. I almost died on a hospital gurney while my parents chose a concert over my children. I was 36, a doctor, a mother of twins bleeding internally, begging for help that never came. That night, I learned two things at once: that my family saw me as a burden, and that I had been quietly paying for their life for years without realizing it. I am Claire Holloway. I am 36 years old, an internal medicine physician, finishing a cardiology fellowship at a public teaching hospital in the Midwest. On paper, my life looks steady. Good job. Reliable income. 2 kids. From the outside, I am the kind of woman people describe as strong, capable, someone who always handles things. That night started like so many others. I was leaving the hospital after a long shift, the kind where time blurs and your body runs on muscle memory. My feet hurt. My head felt thick. I remember thinking about dinner, about how the kids would already be asleep by the time I got home, about how tomorrow would start early again. I was tired, but calm. Tired was normal. Managing was normal. I stopped at a red light a few blocks from the hospital. The intersection was quiet. Suburban quiet. I checked the clock on the dashboard. I remember thinking I still had enough energy to read one bedtime story if the sitter stayed a few minutes late. The light turned green. I eased forward. I never saw the other car. The sound came first. Metal folding into metal, glass exploding. My body jolted sideways as the impact slammed into the driver's side. The steering wheel punched the air out of my lungs. Pain flared sharp and immediate, then turned deep and spreading like something tearing open inside me. Everything went white for a moment. When I came back, there were voices, not panicked, but urgent, professional, hands pressing down. A face hovered above me, close enough that I could see the creases around his eyes. "Claire, stay with me." It took a second to recognize him. Michael Reeves, emergency physician. We had worked together for years. He was calm in the way people get when they are doing exactly what they are trained to do. "You were in a collision," he said. "We are taking you in now. I need you to tell me if the pain gets worse." My mouth felt dry. Every breath sent a wave of pain through my abdomen. "What is wrong with me?" I asked. "Possible internal bleeding," Michael said. "We will know more at the hospital. There is a good chance you will need surgery." Surgery. The word landed heavier than the pain. My kids. The thought cut through everything else. Emma and Ethan, 4 years old, curly hair, sticky fingers. They were at home with the sitter. She was scheduled until 8. I grabbed Michael's sleeve, my fingers slick with blood and sweat. "My kids," I said. "They are at home. The sitter leaves soon." Michael glanced at the clock mounted inside the ambulance. 7:15. "We have about 45 minutes, he said carefully. "Do you have someone who can take over?" I fumbled for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The screen was cracked now, spiderwebbed from the crash, but it still worked. I pulled up my parents' number and pressed call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Robert answered, his voice already impatient. "We are about to head out," he said. "What is it?" "Dad," I said. My voice sounded wrong to my own ears. Thin. "I was in an accident. I am in an ambulance. They think I am bleeding internally. I need you and Mom to go to my house and stay with the kids for a few hours." There was silence. Not shocked silence. Just absence. "Hold on," he said. I heard muffled voices, my mother's tone sharp, my sister's laugh in the background. The line went dead. A second later, my phone buzzed. A text. From my mother. "You are always such a burden. We have concert tickets tonight with Melissa. We planned this for months. Figure it out yourself." I stared at the screen. Read it again. The words did not change. Another buzz. From my father. "You are a doctor. You are used to hospitals. Do not make this bigger than it needs to be." I felt something inside me crack, quiet and clean, like a bone snapping without drama. Michael was watching me. I did not realize how visible my screen was until he spoke. "Claire," he said gently. What did they say? I could not answer. My throat closed. I turned the phone face down like that could erase the words. "I need help finding a sitter," I said instead. "Emergency care. I will pay whatever it costs." Michael nodded without hesitation. He pulled out his own phone and started making calls while the ambulance sped through the dark. Within minutes, he found a 24-hour emergency nanny service. I spoke to them in clipped sentences, slipping into my professional voice because it was the only thing holding me together. "Yes. Tonight. Yes. 2 children. Yes." I authorized the rate. Triple was fine. Anything was fine. When I hung up, my hands were still shaking. "If I do not make it," I said quietly, the words coming out before I could stop them. "There is no one else." Michael did not pretend not to understand. "You are going to make it," he said, "and your kids will be taken care of." The ambulance doors swung open at the hospital bay. Bright lights flooded in. Hands lifted me. Voices called out vitals. The pain had become distant now, replaced by a heavy pressure that made it hard to think. As they wheeled me down the hall, my phone buzzed again. Not with concern, not with questions, just silence after cruelty. I looked at the screen one last time before everything blurred. My mother's message was still there. "You are a burden." They transferred me onto the operating table. Someone placed an oxygen mask over my face. The ceiling lights slid past overhead. I thought about Emma's laugh, about Ethan's serious little frown when he concentrated, about how I had never once missed a payment, never once said no, never once asked for much in return. And as the anesthesiologist told me to count backward, I realized something that settled over me heavier than fear. If I died tonight, my parents would still go to that concert. The room faded. The phone slipped from my fingers. And for the first time in my life, lying there between consciousness and nothing, I wondered if I had always been this alone and just never let myself see it. Chapter 2. The days after surgery moved slowly, not because time had changed, but because my body finally forced me to stop running. I lay in a hospital bed with machines humming softly around me, my abdomen sore and tight, my thoughts louder than they had ever been. Pain medication dulled the edges, but it did nothing to quiet the memories that kept drifting in when the room went still. For the first time in years, there was nowhere else I had to be. Nurses came and went. They checked my vitals, adjusted IV lines, reminded me to breathe deeply even when it hurt. Friends from work stopped by when they could, bringing coffee I could not drink, and smiles that were meant to be reassuring. When they asked how I was doing, I said I was okay. That word came easily. It always had. When the room was empty again, my mind slipped backward, far past the accident, far past the operating room lights, back to the patterns I had never questioned. Melissa had always been the bright one. 3 years older, effortlessly charming, the kind of girl teachers remembered and neighbors adored. When she needed something, it was never framed as a need. It was framed as potential. She needed support because she was going places. She needed understanding because she felt things deeply. I needed less. That was how it was explained gently, like a compliment. When Melissa talked about studying fashion in New York, my mother cried at the kitchen table, pressing her napkin to her eyes, saying how proud she was of her brave daughter. My father paced the room, already planning how to make it work, who to call, what strings to pull. When I said I wanted to be a doctor, my father nodded once and said that sounded practical. That was the whole conversation. I learned early that being reliable earned you quiet approval, not celebration. I was the kid who finished homework without being asked, the teenager who did not cause trouble, the college student who took extra shifts at the campus clinic without complaining. When I came home exhausted, my mother would smile and tell relatives that I was the easy one, the strong one, the one they never had to worry about. I absorbed that identity without realizing it. I wore it like armor. During medical school, when the hours stretched into weeks that felt endless, I never called home to say how overwhelmed I was. When residency pushed me past exhaustion into something colder, I told myself it was temporary. Everyone else seemed to manage. I should be able to as well. When my marriage ended quietly and painfully, I told my parents after the paperwork was done. My mother sighed and said she was sorry it had not worked out. My father asked if I had a plan. I did. I always did. When I found out I was pregnant with twins in 2021 alone and terrified and already stretched thin, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the obstetrics office and cried until my chest hurt. I did not call home. I told myself I did not want to burden anyone. That word again. I managed the pregnancy, the complications, the sleepless nights with 2 newborns while studying for board exams. Friends asked how I was doing, and I smiled and said tired, but fine. My parents sent congratulations cards. They did not come. I told myself they trusted me to handle it. That was the story I told myself about everything. The first time my parents asked for financial help, it sounded temporary. My father called one evening and said there had been a hiccup with the mortgage payment. He said things were tight this month. He asked if I could help just this once. Just this once felt reasonable. They were my parents. They had raised me. I transferred the money without hesitation and went back to studying. The next request came months later, then another. Insurance premiums when my father retired earlier than planned. Repairs on the house. Unexpected expenses. Each time the tone was casual, almost embarrassed, as if they assumed I would say yes before the question was even finished. And I did. I never framed it as support. I framed it as responsibility. I told myself I was lucky to be able to help. I told myself Melissa needed more because her work was unstable, because she was creative, because her path was harder. I told myself I did not need the same kind of care. On the rare occasions a doubt crept in, I pushed it away. I reminded myself that family meant showing up even when it was inconvenient, especially when it was inconvenient. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the pale ceiling tiles, I finally let myself examine the cost of that belief. I remembered a night during residency when I called my mother exhausted and scared after losing a patient for the first time. I told her I did not know if I was cut out for this. She listened for a moment, then said she knew I would figure it out because I always did. I remembered calling my father after my twins were born, my voice shaking as I asked if they might visit. He said the drive was long and they had a lot going on. He said we would plan something later. Later never came. What did come were the expectations, the quiet assumption that I would continue to manage, continue to give, continue to absorb whatever was placed on my shoulders. In the hospital, a social worker stopped by to check on me. She asked if I had support at home. I told her I did. It was easier than explaining the truth. When she left, I stared at the empty chair beside my bed and felt a familiar ache, not sharp enough to demand attention, but constant enough to wear me down. I had confused endurance with love for so long that I did not know where one ended and the other began. As the days passed and my strength slowly returned, that realization settled deeper. It was not dramatic. It did not come with anger or resolve. It came with a quiet sadness, the kind that arrives when you see something clearly for the first time and realize it has always been there. I had never been the daughter who asked for help, not because I did not need it, but because I had learned that needing less made me easier to love. And as I lay there listening to the steady beep of the monitor, I understood something that would not let me go. I was not strong because I had been supported. I was strong because I had learned to survive without it. The thought stayed with me long after the room went dark again, waiting patient, as if it knew it would matter soon. Chapter 3. Morning light slipped through the narrow window and landed on the edge of my hospital bed. By the third day, the pain had settled into something manageable, a deep soreness that reminded me to move carefully but no longer stole my breath. The nurses had stopped hovering quite so closely. My body was stabilizing. My mind was not. I asked one of the residents to bring me my laptop from my bag. She raised an eyebrow and smiled. "You doctors never rest," she said. "I just need to check something," I replied. She handed it over and reminded me not to overdo it. When she left, the room went quiet again. The monitors hummed softly. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled past, life continuing indifferent. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. I did not feel angry, not yet. I felt steady in a way I had not felt before, like my thoughts had finally slowed enough to line up in front of me instead of crashing all at once. I started scrolling. At first, it looked ordinary, the same rhythm month after month. Then I narrowed the window, filtered the transactions, followed the trail backward. $2,100. Every month. Mortgage payment. The same lender. The same date. I leaned back against the pillows and closed my eyes for a second. That number had lived quietly in my life for years, tucked into the background like white noise. I kept going. $650. Insurance premium. That one had started later, right around the time my father retired earlier than planned. I remembered that call. His voice had been strained, embarrassed. "We just need a little help getting through this transition," he had said. "Just until things settle." I had said yes without hesitation. I scrolled further. One-time charges, repairs, emergency expenses, things that had always been framed as temporary. A broken furnace, a car that would not start, a leak in the roof that could not wait. Each transaction pulled up a memory. A night I stayed late at the hospital skipping dinner because a patient was crashing. I sent the transfer from my phone in the hallway between rooms. My daughter Emma turning 4. I remember lighting the candles alone in my kitchen because my parents could not make the drive. The same week, I paid for the new tires on their car. A winter morning when Ethan had a fever, and I called out of rounds holding him while he slept against my chest. That afternoon, my father called to say the insurance payment was due. I did not write any of this down yet. I just let the connections form. I pulled up a calculator and started adding slowly, carefully. I checked myself twice, then a third time. The number climbed higher than I expected, even though some part of me had always known it would. When I reached the end, I stopped. $348,000, 8 years. I stared at the total until the numbers blurred. Not because I could not afford it. I had managed. I always managed. But because of what that money represented, that was a house. That was college funds. That was time I could have taken off when I was burning out, when my body was screaming for rest. What hollowed me out was not the amount. It was the silence around it. No thank you, no checking in, no concern for how I was holding up while carrying all of it. A knock sounded softly at the door. I minimized the screen just as Michael Reeves stepped inside holding a paper cup of coffee. "Thought you might want the smell even if you cannot drink it yet," he said, setting it down. I smiled faintly. "You know me too well." He glanced at my laptop. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Just looking at some numbers." He pulled up a chair. "Numbers can be dangerous." I let out a quiet breath. I think I have been living inside them without noticing. He did not push. He never did. He just sat there, present, which felt rarer than it should have. After he left, I opened the screen again. I scrolled back to the beginning. The first payment, the one I barely remembered making. It had seemed small at the time, reasonable, something any good daughter would do. I whispered the question aloud, even though no one was there to hear it. When did this stop being help and start being expected? There was no answer, just the quiet click of the trackpad as I closed one tab and opened another. Work email. Messages from colleagues filled the inbox. Updates, questions, requests. One from a fellow attending caught my eye. "Hey, Claire, can you cover an extra shift next week? You always handle these situations so well." I stared at that line longer than necessary. Always handle. I thought about the patient I had stayed late for last month, a woman my age with 2 kids of her own. I remembered holding her hand as she cried, promising her she was not alone. I had meant it. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. A text from my mother. "Hope you are feeling better. Let us know when you are home." Nothing else. No reference to the message in the ambulance. No apology. Just an assumption that things would return to normal. I set the phone down without replying. That afternoon, a nurse named Linda came in to check my incision. She worked the night shift often. We had talked before, usually about our kids. "How are you really doing?" she asked, adjusting the bandage. I shrugged. "Recovering." She looked at me for a moment. "You know you do not have to be the strong one all the time." The words landed unexpectedly hard. "I know," I said, though I was not sure I truly did. After she left, I sat with the realization that strength had become a role I performed, not a choice I made. I reopened my bank account and navigated to the section labeled Scheduled Payments. The list was longer than I liked. Familiar names, familiar amounts. My finger hovered over the first one. I waited for the surge of guilt, the panic, the voice in my head telling me I was being selfish. It did not come. Instead, there was a strange calm, like the moment after a storm when the air feels cleaner. I clicked cancel. A confirmation window appeared. I confirmed. One by one, I stopped them all. When it was done, I closed the laptop and rested my hands on top of it. My chest felt lighter, as if something heavy had been set down without fanfare. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel cruel. I felt relieved. Outside, the sky was turning the pale gold of late afternoon. Somewhere down the hall, a patient laughed. Life moving forward. I lay back and closed my eyes, letting the quiet settle in around me, knowing that whatever came next, the old pattern had finally been broken, and there was no going back to not seeing it. Chapter 4. The shift back into normal life happened quietly without any announcement. I was discharged, cleared to work, limited hours, told to take it slow. I nodded and smiled and did exactly what was expected of me. I went home. I made dinner for the kids. I returned emails. I rested when I was supposed to. For a while, nothing seemed different. Then the phone calls started. Not to me. Around me. A cousin I had not spoken to in years messaged asking if I was doing okay, adding that everyone was worried about me. A friend of my mother called to say she hoped I was taking care of myself and not pushing too hard after what I had been through. The words sounded kind, but something underneath them felt off. I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then said my parents were concerned I had changed since the accident, that I seemed distant, emotional, unstable. I stared at the screen for a long moment after the message ended. My first instinct was to defend myself, to explain, to clarify. My second instinct was exhaustion. I did nothing. A few days later, my Aunt Diane called. She was my mother's sister, practical, precise, the kind of woman who kept her own records and never lost track of a detail. "I thought you should hear this from me," she said, skipping any preamble. "Your parents are telling people you cut them off financially because you are angry and irrational." I closed my eyes and leaned against the kitchen counter. "And what do you think?" I asked. There was a pause. "I think I finally understand why you never talk about it," she said. "And I think my father wants to see you." Her father was my grandfather, William Carter. He was 72, a retired federal judge who had spent his career listening to people argue over facts. He did not raise his voice. He did not guess. He observed. I agreed to meet. The occasion was his birthday. A family gathering at his house planned long before my accident. Everyone would be there. My parents, Melissa, aunts, uncles, cousins, the kind of event that felt safe because it was public. When I arrived, the house was already full. Laughter drifted from the living room. The smell of food hung in the air. For a moment, everything looked exactly as it always had. My mother greeted me with a tight smile. "There she is," she said. "How are you feeling today?" "Fine," I replied. She touched my arm briefly like a gesture for an audience. "We have all been so worried about you." Melissa stood nearby, arms crossed, watching me. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "You scared everyone," she said. "You know that, right?" I nodded. I did not argue. I did not apologize. Throughout the afternoon, I felt like a character in a story that was being told without my input. Conversation stopped when I walked into a room, then resumed with forced brightness. People asked how my recovery was going, then exchanged glances when I answered. I could feel the narrative circling me. The fragile daughter, the one who could not handle stress, the one who lashed out. My father pulled me aside near the kitchen. "We are concerned," he said quietly. "This behavior is not like you." "What behavior?" I asked. "Cutting us off without explanation," he said. "After everything we have done." I met his eyes. For the first time, I did not rush to soften my response. "I did not cut you off," I said. "I stopped paying." He frowned. "You are being dramatic." Before I could respond, my grandfather's voice carried across the room. "Everyone, could I have your attention?" The room fell silent in a way that surprised even me. People gathered plates in hand, conversations trailing off. My grandfather stood slowly, one hand resting on the back of his chair. "I will not keep you long," he said. "I am old. I get tired. But I have listened to a lot of stories in my life, and I have learned to recognize when one side is missing." He looked directly at my parents. "For 8 years," he continued, "Claire has been paying the mortgage on this house." A murmur rippled through the room. My mother opened her mouth. "That is not accurate," she said quickly. My grandfather raised a hand, not harshly, just enough. "I have the records," he said. $2,100 a month since 2016. She also paid the insurance premiums after Robert retired. $650 monthly. Additional expenses, repairs, emergencies. He turned a page in the folder he held. "The total is $348,000. The room went very still. Melissa shook her head. "That cannot be right," she said. "Why would she do that?" My grandfather looked at her calmly. "Because she was asked," he said. My father's face had gone pale. "She never said it was a problem," he said. I stepped forward then. My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. "I did not say it was a problem because I was taught not to," I said. "I was taught that being dependable meant not asking for anything back." My mother looked at me as if she did not recognize me. "You are twisting things," she said. "We were always grateful." I took out my phone. My hands did not shake. "This is the message I received while I was in the ambulance," I said. I read it aloud. "You are always such a burden. Figure it out yourself." No one spoke. My grandfather closed the folder. "Claire has not cut anyone out of her life," he said. "She has stopped carrying responsibilities that were never hers." My father stared at the floor. My mother looked around the room, searching for support that did not come. Melissa said nothing. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, relieved, empty. "I am not asking anyone to agree with me," I said. "I am just done pretending this was normal." The gathering ended early. People left quietly. Hugs were awkward. Apologies were absent. As I walked to my car, the evening air felt cool against my skin. I sat behind the wheel for a moment without starting the engine. The story they had been telling about me had collapsed under its own weight. No shouting, no victory speech, just facts laid out plainly. I drove home knowing something fundamental had shifted, and whatever came next would be different whether anyone else was ready for it or not. Chapter 5. The weeks that followed unfolded without drama, which surprised me more than anything else. There were no late-night confrontations, no long apologies, no sudden changes of heart. Life simply adjusted as if a weight had been removed and everything else had to recalibrate. The first real sign came when my father called. I was in my kitchen making macaroni for Emma and Ethan, the kind with the bright orange sauce they loved. My phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel before answering. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" I asked. "The house," he said. His voice sounded tired. Not angry, just worn down. "We cannot keep up with the payments." I did not say anything right away. "We are going to have to sell," he added. "Probably soon." I looked out the window at the small patch of grass behind my apartment building, at the way the late afternoon sun slanted across it. "I understand," I said. There was a pause on the line long enough that I could hear him breathing. "You are not going to help," he said. It was a statement, not a question. "No," I replied. He exhaled sharply. "We will stay with Frank for a while." Frank was my uncle, my father's younger brother. Practical, quiet, the kind of man who never asked questions unless he already knew the answer. "Okay," I said. The call ended shortly after that. No yelling, no pleading, just acceptance settling in heavy and unavoidable. Melissa lasted longer than I expected. For a while, she pretended nothing had changed. She posted photos online, smiling at events, tagging brands she used to work with. But support dries up quickly when it is no longer being quietly funded. She called me one night, weeks after the gathering at my grandfather's house. "You really embarrassed us," she said. "I told the truth," I replied. "You could have handled it privately," she said. "You did not have to do that." "I did handle it privately," I said, "for 8 years. She was quiet for a moment. "I am having a hard time," she admitted finally. I waited. "Aren't you going to say anything?" she asked. "I am listening," I said. Another pause. Then she sighed. "Never mind," she said and hung up. I did not call her back. I did not celebrate any of it. There was no moment where I felt victorious, no sense of revenge fulfilled. What I felt instead was distance, a widening space between who I had been and who I was becoming. With the money that no longer left my account each month, I opened 2 college savings plans, one for Emma and one for Ethan. I set them up carefully, choosing amounts that felt sustainable, intentional. I moved us into a smaller apartment closer to the hospital. It was nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a narrow balcony, but it was ours. The kids adjusted quickly, they always did. The biggest change came at night. For years I had slept with my phone face up on the nightstand, volume high, half expecting it to light up with another request, another emergency that was somehow my responsibility. I had woken to vibrations, heart racing, only to find messages about money or problems I was expected to solve. Now the phone stayed on silent. The first night I slept through without checking it, I woke up confused, then relieved. Mornings became quieter too, breakfast without rushing, coffee I actually finished while it was still warm, dinners without tension curling in my chest, waiting for the next obligation. At work, I started saying no. When a colleague asked if I could cover an extra shift, I checked my schedule and said I was unavailable. He blinked, surprised, then nodded. "No problem," he said. And just like that, the world did not end. One afternoon, I visited my grandfather. He sat in his study, sunlight filtering through the blinds, papers neatly stacked on his desk. "You look different," he said as I sat down. "I feel different," I replied. He smiled slightly. "That tends to happen when people stop carrying what was never theirs." I thought about that on the drive home. The hardest part was not losing my family's approval. It was letting go of the version of myself who believed love had to be earned through endurance. I had thought that being needed was the same as being valued, that if I kept giving eventually it would come back to me in the form of care or gratitude. It never had. And once I stopped giving, what remained was the truth. Some nights I still felt the ache of it, the absence, the knowledge that my parents might never understand, that Melissa might always see herself as the victim, that there would be holidays that felt awkward or distant. But alongside that ache was something new. Peace. The kind that settles into your body when you are no longer bracing for impact. One evening after the kids were asleep, I stood on the balcony and watched the city lights flicker on. Cars moved steadily along the road below. Somewhere someone laughed. Life unfolding without me having to manage it. I thought about the night of the accident, about the moment when I realized I was alone. What I understood now was that being alone was not the same as being abandoned. I had myself. I had my children. I had boundaries. Love that requires self-destruction is not love. It is obligation wearing a familiar face. If you have ever been the one who always handled it, who never asked who kept giving because it felt easier than disappointing people, I see you. And maybe this story is not just mine after all.